Thanks. Hey, it works. It's always nice. So today I'm going to talk to you about identity. Anybody know the reference here? Pearl Jam? So before you go to sleep, with the topic of identity, what I'm going to tell you is about how digital identity is going to change from almost everything you've understood for the last 15 to 20 years. Now you might wonder, why is that so? And the reason is blockchain, or at least distributed ledger technology. We'll talk more about why that is so and how that works in a little bit. About 15 years ago, no, 12 years ago, getting ahead of myself, a few friends and I thought digital identity is broken, so let's get some of our friends together and try and figure out how we can fix it. So we got a couple of dozen people together, met in the Hillside Club at Berkeley, and had a meeting, talked about digital identity. We thought we'll have a couple of these, we'll solve this digital identity problem for the internet, and then we can go on and do all of the other interesting things that depend on identity. Well, 12 years later, we're still working on it. We just had our 23rd meeting last month, and while there have been a lot of advances, things like OpenID, OAuth, and other identity protocols, we are still not quite there. But there is light at the end of the tunnel, and that's what I'm here to talk about. Now, online identity is a problem for everybody. Businesses and users, individuals, struggle with too many passwords and accounts. For individuals, that's a headache. It also represents some risk of identity theft. For businesses, it represents real friction and real costs that they have to manage all of these identities. And of course, people lose identities, they lose accounts, they lose passwords. That results in costly support calls. It's not a good situation. Now, another problem is that people are reluctant to sign up for more accounts. The average person has between 150 and 200 online accounts that they're managing, keeping passwords, all of those kinds of things. And we wonder why they keep the same password in all of them. This is not a very good situation for people. And then third, all of the personal information is a problem. As a business, you probably struggle with keeping information up to date about your customers. People struggle with keeping it up to date on things that they do all of the time. Another problem with it is we end up in situations where that data is subject to being lost because of hacks and other problems. And regulations like GDPR are going to make this even more costly to manage. The answer is something that goes by the name of self-sovereign identity, which is a little bit of a mouthful. Sovereign identities allow for individuals to create their own identifiers and then use those identifiers when they work with businesses. And this is a really big advance because it changes the balance of power in terms of how individuals and organizations relate online. Self-sovereign identity has properties that are similar to the internet. And since I'm in a room with broadband experts, I thought maybe we could look at some of the features of the internet and see how they might apply to online identity systems. Now, the internet is, as you all know, a huge driver of innovation over the last 15 to 20 years. The internet is special, right? It was designed to be a decentralized communication medium, and as a decentralized communication medium, it has very few single points of failure. It's designed to have as few as possible. Now, I'm speaking about the internet. That is, the system that routes packets between machines using IP addresses, not all of the stuff that's built on top of it like DNS and email and all of the other things. I'm specifically talking about the internet. The internet wasn't designed to connect people, it was designed to connect machines. And it did a pretty good job of solving the identity problem for machines. IP addresses work great. We wish we could all move to IPv6, but you know, that's a different story. Now, we could look to the internet to think about what kinds of system, or what kind of features we would want for a decentralized identity system for people. Now, there's lots of technical reasons we could talk about the internet, or lots of technical features we could describe about the internet, but I want to describe it in terms of 3 virtues that Dave Weinberger and Doc Searles put in an essay that they called World Events. The first virtue that they claimed for the internet was that no one owns it. The second virtue that they claimed for the internet was that everybody can use it. And the third virtue was anyone can improve it. So let's see what those would mean in terms of a digital identity system. The internet is a public good. Nobody owns it. And it's a reliable resource that works universally. We don't think about interoperability when we're all working on the internet. Online identity doesn't work that way. Think about how online identity works. Every online identity that you have was given to you by someone else, someone who owns that identity. Right? That identity was provided to you, and it's subject to the terms and conditions of whoever did that. So Amazon, as an example, right? You go and sign up for an account at Amazon, they own the account. They can take it away from you at any point. It's subject to their terms and conditions, which they can change retroactively. That's not an identity that you own, that's an identity that Amazon owns. And it's fine for buying stuff from Amazon, but it really creates a problem when we get a number of these things. Now in contrast, we get the get this projector back. There we go. In contrast, a self-sovereign identity system feels like you're at the center. It feels like you have an identity that is being used by all of these other organizations that you're working with. In this model, businesses, individuals, organizations all create an identity that they use to interact with other people or with other organizations. Now, being at the center is just a perception, because it really looks like the internet. It's really everybody connected as peers and interacting with each other. This gives individuals more control, less risk of their personal information being stolen, and more freedom with how they interact online. For businesses, it gives them an identity system that they can use without having to build and maintain. It cuts down on customer service calls, and it gives them trustworthy, up-to-date information about their customers. Now, the second virtue that Doc and Dave described was this idea that everyone can use it. Online identity, as I mentioned, every online identity you have is subject to control by somebody else. They have to provide it to you. So you don't really own that identity. Furthermore, if you're a business and you want to use something like Facebook Connect or Google Login as part of your solution in your business, you're building your business on someone else's business model. You have no guarantee that those identity systems are going to exist later because those companies might choose to do something else. An internet-like identity system has to be public. It has to be something that everybody can use without being subject to an identity provider or a system administrator or someone else providing an account to you. A business should be able to use these things too without getting permission. Now, the third virtue they talked about was that anyone can improve it. Let's say you're building your business and you're using Facebook Connect as part of your login scheme and you don't quite like how it works. Too bad. Facebook Connect belongs to Facebook. They decide how it gets improved, and they improve it based on how they want it to be used and what they want to get out of it. Now, in contrast, the internet gets improved in lots of different ways. It gets improved by people every day, some of whom, or most of whom, have no formal relationship with any of the internet's governing bodies. There are a couple of different ways that that happens. One, open standards, open protocols, open source code allow lots of people to participate in making the system better. The second thing is that anyone can design and build new services on top of the internet, meaning that anyone can go out and build a service that makes the internet better. An internet-like identity system should have those same features. It should also allow people to interact with it, build services on top of it in a way that improves how everybody else uses it. Now, that's nice. Those are nice features and gives us an idea of what we want out of an internet-like identity system. But what are the things that really happen on an internet-like identity system that make it different? The internet gave rise to lots of new business opportunities because it reduced a lot of friction and it provided new ways of thinking about how we interact with people. Let me explain why this is also true for self-sovereign identity. Now, we've already talked about how self-sovereign identity can give businesses and people an identity system that they can use without having to get permission from other people. But there's a more important way that this actually reduces friction. In the physical world, people carry things like driver's licenses as credentials, and they use these credentials in various ways. A driver's license, as you all know, contains things like your birthday and your address and your name. Furthermore, it's a document that is trusted in lots of different places by lots of different people, which means that you can use a driver's license at a pharmacy or a school to provide information to people about what your name is, right? They look at that and they say, oh, the driver's license division believes that your address is this, so I'll believe that that's your address, or to prove that you have a certain birthday or whatever. In other words, in the physical world, people are the holders and conveyors of credentials that include verifiable attributes. And these attributes are usable by many people because they trust that credential. Now, the interesting thing about this is that when you look at a driver's license and get the birthday off of it and trust it, you don't have to call up the driver's license division and say, hey, I'm looking at Phil Windley's driver's license here, and is this really a driver's license? In other words, you use that attribute without any kind of direct connection to the party that issued the driver's license. You don't have to have an integration. Now, the way internet identity systems work today, things like social login or federated identity in a business-to-business context, is that you're using their login system, and these systems don't typically support this kind of third-party credential sharing. So when you use Facebook to log into another site, in this case, well, it's gone, maybe it's coming back. When you're logging into Meebo, for example, what happens is Meebo gets some data from Facebook, depending on what what they've asked Facebook to share with them or what you've agreed to. But there's no way for a third party to come in and share data on top of that connection. There's no way for a verifiable claim to be shared on top of that identity system. Now, self-sovereign identity systems have a built-in method for supporting third-party claims that functions the same way that third-party claims work in the physical world. The identity owner can use a claim from one party to prove attributes to another party. This happens in an ad hoc way between parties that don't have any kind of prior relationship, much less some kind of technical integration. When you have the ability to trust what someone says to you instantly because you can validate the claim that they have based on cryptography, that cuts down on the number of API integrations, the number of interactions that you have. You don't have to have a prior business relationship with a company before you have some sort of integration with, or before you exchange information with a third-party claim. And there are several other benefits to these verifiable claims. One, when customers share data with you and they're using verifiable claims, you're much more likely to get accurate information. And also, when they share this information with you, you get automatic consent, meaning that reduces your liability because you have consent to use data that they've shared with you. Now, there's another interesting feature here. Unlike a driver's license, where when someone says, how old are you, and you provide them your driver's license and they get your birthday from that, in a self-sovereign identity system, you can share information. You can share just the information that needs to be shared. So I can prove, for example, that I'm 21, or I can prove that I live in Utah, or I can prove that I'm a credit union customer for 20 years without ever revealing my my address or my birthday or the fact that, or even the name of the credit union that I happen to belong to. So the bottom line is I can reveal the information that needs to be revealed and only the information that needs to be revealed. But there's another feature that we add on top of this. All of this claim information can be revoked. So let's say that you're carrying around a digital copy of your driver's license as part of your self-sovereign identity. And in this driver's license, you've got all of this information and you're using it to perform different functions that are as you complete forms and other things online. But now your driver's license gets revoked. That can automatically be noted in the self-sovereign identity system so that that driver's license is now noted as revoked so that people getting those claims can decide whether they want to trust them from a revoked driver's license or not. And then when the driver's license gets reinstated, that is immediately noted in the self-sovereign identity system so that that claim can be seen. All of this happens without the individual or the person who's relying on the claim or anybody else having to know about this. The driver's license division, as it revokes or unrevokes, what's the opposite of revoke? Reissues, I guess? Reissues the driver's license. That all happens in a way that is transparent to the people who are relying on the claims. Now, the bottom line here is that this eliminates costly integrations. Instead of businesses having to have business development deals and do integrations through APIs that are, with lots of developers, there is a single system that everybody knows based on a protocol that allows this information to be transported in a way that can be trusted. That's what's going to drive these kinds of systems forward, is this idea of verifiable claims and the ability to validate the information and trust that information. Verifiable claims are going to drive the number of relying parties, which will drive the number of users onto these systems. Now, as broadband providers, you are, or in the broadband industry, you're in a position to be able to use these kind of verifiable claims in these self-sovereign identity systems. For example, if you rely on having some sort of bank verification before you do business with a customer in a business-to-business relationship, banks are big believers in self-sovereign identity systems. I know that may sound shocking based on the fact that banks are not the most innovative, forward-looking institutions that we run across every day, but they are. This is something that they are pushing forward with in a big way. Another way that you might think about using this is you probably have claims that you could write about your customers. So for example, if you provide service at a physical location, you could write a verifiable claim that a certain business is located at a certain location. And because claims can be premium claims, that is, they can be charged for, you could turn this information that you just have sitting in a database now into a revenue source, because now this verifiable claim could be useful to somebody else who's willing to pay to be able to use that and trust you as a source for that information. Now, the best news is that this is actually all available now. This isn't science fiction. As I mentioned, this is based on Bitcoin-like technology. It's not Bitcoin. It's not based on the same thing. But this technology is available right now. I am the chairman of a nonprofit foundation called the Dovrin Foundation, which is deploying a network that will provide self-sovereign identity. The Sovereign Network, right now we have a test network up, and I'd invite any of you who are interested to come play with it. You can download nodes and start playing with the self-sovereign identity system now. We hope to have the production network up first quarter of the next year. The system is based on distributed ledger technology, as I said. And what I mean by that, if you're not familiar with that, is you have a ledger, right? A ledger meaning that is a time-ordered series of transactions, and it's distributed. Lots of people have a copy. The key the important feature is that you have to create consensus between all these people that have a copy. And that's the magic of the network. That's when I say we're standing up an identity network, that's what I mean, is that we have a series of nodes that are all computing to be able to create consensus between all of these ledgers. So there's lots of different copies. Everybody can look at the copy and see the information that's in that. It's all based on sound cryptographic principles that have been around for years to protect privacy, to make it secure. And it's all open source and all open protocol. So it has the same features as the internet, meaning nobody owns it, everybody can use it, anyone can improve it. So I invite you to take a look, and we're not taking questions now, but there's my contact information. I'd welcome you sending me an email or going and looking at information we have online and checking out what this is. Thank you.